Okay, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to our first pitch competition training today. Today is the first in 5 Monday trainings in preparation for the pitch competition on August 7th. Throughout today's webinar, feel free to enter your questions on the Q&A tool, and we can address them throughout the webinar. But also, we're going to have like a raise your hand function at the end so that you can verbally ask your questions if you want to. We'll also have polls throughout this webinar, so make sure you guys are participating in those. Make sure you guys are joining the GroupMe also for any reminders. I send GroupMe links, reminders, a lot of information through there. So if you haven't joined yet, please join that. And then lastly, I just want to thank Professor Mike Halloran for being here with us today. I'm just going to hand it off to you to get started.
Hi, everybody. This is Mike Halloran. For those of you who I have not met in the past, I have a multiple pathway through the startup world. I started my career at P&G, but then moved on to a digital marketing career into digital marketing for 10 years, and then have done 5 startups over the last 20 years. And so very involved in the startup community here in Cincinnati. I also teach at Xavier, both entrepreneurship and strategy. I volunteer as the VP of marketing at one of our accelerators called Ocean. And we have just a great startup community. I'm really excited that you're part of this program and that I'm able to kind of share a bunch of things with you as it relates to the pitch competition and kind of where we're going to go. So with that, let me move our slides forward here. Okay, so for today, the agenda is I just want to do some quick introductions. We'll then go through the components of the competition itself and some important dates. And then we'll talk about some of the keys to success for your pitches. And then the bulk of it will be on kind of our week 1 training. We're going to have 5 weeks of training for the pitch competition. There'll be some next steps coming out of today's webinar, and then we'll have it open for Q&A. Now, also, as Zaina mentioned, this is a very interactive presentation too. So we're going to have a number of polls. So please participate in the polls. You have about 20 seconds to kind of post your answer in there. Really simple questions, but that'll be helpful. And then there's a couple times during the presentation, I'd like to have you type in the chat some responses. And then as we go through the presentation, if you do have any questions in the Q&A section, you can type those questions. And we'll be taking breaks throughout the presentation to answer some of those questions. And then at the very end, we'll also handle questions too. So lots of interaction, lots of ability. I want to make sure you really understand kind of how a pitch competition works. And then I'm going to give you lots of good training here to kind of get through week 1 overall. So just as introductions, I'll be leading the majority of the call here today, or the webinar today. I'm kind of put together this whole 5-week curriculum for you to teach you how to pull together pitches and how to kind of develop some great ideas. Zan Walters from Centrifuge, I think many of you have already known and got emails from. She's going to talk a little bit about the program itself. Bethany Allen is also on the webinar here too. She is running the final pitch competition day, and she'll be here monitoring that. And Zaina's here to kind of help behind the scenes with any of the Q&A and all that. So you've got the 4 of us on this presentation right now. So let's put up our first poll. So let's get everybody interacting here. So what best describes your entrepreneurial experience? And check off these things. So check any one of these. Which one best describes your entrepreneurial experience? And then we'll close this poll here in a few seconds here, and then we'll share the results with everybody. All right, let's close the poll and share the results here. All right, so let's see. 32% of you want to change the world. Well, that's the Pete Blackshaw and Tarek's effect from last week. I heard they did a great kickoff meeting and all that stuff. So that is absolutely great. Some of you are just curious about entrepreneurship. A few of you like Shark Tank. Oh my gosh, 23% of you are currently involved in an entrepreneurial venture. That's surprisingly high. That's great. Well, all these are good answers, no matter where you answered in this. You'll get a lot out of this whole program. And once again, I'm really excited that you're part of this as well as the speaker series that we have going on. So let's move on and get to the next slide. So a lot of you wanted to change the world, you know, and I know Tarek and Pete talked about what an entrepreneur is all about. And so the pitch competition is all about, can you create a great idea that can change the world? And what's really interesting is we're in a really unique time these days. The world has changed dramatically. And actually, quite often when we go through changes in the world and the economy and everything else, that's when a lot of startup things actually happen. If you flash back to 2008, 2009, 2010, when we had the big recession back then, a lot of startups actually came out of that time period. And in fact, when you think about some of the startups that have kind of evolved over the years, we've had some amazing new companies, you know, sprout, and we'll talk about some of these companies today. So Airbnb, you know, started in 2008. Today, Airbnb is worth more than Hilton or Marriott. Think about that. Airbnb is worth more than Hilton or Marriott, and they don't even own a single property. Uber, I'm sure a lot of you used Uber. We'll talk about that today. Lime, you know, an amazing product that came out there. Snapchat. Robinhood, 10 million people are using Robinhood today for doing their investments, all through their mobile app. Tesla, think about the strides they've made, and Elon Musk and kind of how they've grown. And then Apple. Apple's probably one of the interesting ones, because when you think about Apple, they've done innovation and new ideas for years. I mean, they came out with the first Mac computer, and they got into iPads, and then the iPhone, and then iTunes, and then AirPods, the most recent thing. So all sorts of great innovations coming out of that. Interesting enough, look at all these companies up there. Most of these companies did not really have to invent a new technology. They didn't really have to invent something brand new to get going. Tesla and Apple did, but all those other companies up there, they used existing technology and reapplied it to their business model and came up with some new ideas to kind of really change the world and build valuable businesses that are changing and making our lives better each day. So that's going to be our challenge to you, is how do you come up with some big ideas that potentially can change the world? Okay, so we're going to have a pitch competition. Here's the next poll. How much do you know about a pitch competition? And we'll post this poll up there. I know what one is, but this is my first as a participant. I've been in one before. I've won a pitch competition in the past. I'm not sure what a pitch competition is. I was a pitcher on my baseball team. Check your answer. A few more seconds to get everybody to answer. All right, let's close this poll and share the answers. Okay, so let's see, 38% of you, this is kind of what I expected. This is your first participant experience in a pitch competition. Well, we're gonna teach you what a pitch competition is all about. And for those of you not sure about what one is, you'll definitely learn about that as we kind of go through. 22% of you actually have been in one. Oh my gosh, and 7% of you actually have won one in the past. Okay, so this sounds like we've got some good competition here and all that. And for those of you who were a pitcher on your baseball team, congratulations. Hopefully we'll have some baseball back here pretty soon. Okay, so what I want to do right now is we're going to go through and talk a little bit about what a pitch competition is. So I'm going to turn this over to Zand, and Zand's going to kind of take you through the key components of our program and some really important dates. We'll have then an opportunity for Q&A kind of at the end, or as we go through this, if you have any questions, feel free to type them in the Q&A part. But Zand, do you want to take over and talk a little bit about our pitch competition?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I hope you all had a great holiday weekend, and we're really excited to kick off today. And a special thanks to Mike, Bethany, and Zaina for all their great work to set you all up for success. So what we're going to do is walk through the next 5 weeks of training with Mike. So please make sure you attend every single one of these Mondays from 10 to 11:30 on Zoom, exactly what we're doing today. And they're in sequential order. So it's really important because the weeks build on each other. So we have July 6th, which is today, the kickoff and problem identification. July 13th, the ideation techniques. July 20th, the business model canvas, which is a really cool tool that Mike's going to show you how to use. July 27th, building a pitch deck. So you're going to get the template and start working through and building that. And then August 3rd, Bethany will be joining for pitch tips and coaching along with Mike. So please make sure you have all those calendared. Everybody should have meeting requests on those. If you don't, please reach out to us, Zaina and myself, and we can send that to you to make sure it gets on your schedule right away. And then the calendar has all the Zoom links in addition to the meeting requests. So everybody should have the calendar as well through the emails I've sent the last couple Fridays. In terms of team structure, I also sent Friday to you in a big email, all the pitch teams. So please make sure you have your team information, and I put everyone's emails on there as well. So it's a diverse team. We have a team lead, we have a mentor, and a planning team member all supporting the team. So the team lead, mentor, and planning team member I'll get into in the next slide, what their responsibilities are. So you'll learn a little bit more about that in a minute. Then it'll all culminate with the pitch competition on Friday, August 7th from 9 to noon. And that will be broadcast live as well. So your parents will be able to watch, and it'll be through Zoom. It'll be all virtual since this whole program this summer is all virtual. So Mike, let's move on to the next slide. So in terms of the teams, let's talk through the teams for a minute. Spent a lot of intentional time making sure we had some really great balanced teams. So we have 16 teams of 5 to 6 students. We have a team lead, and the team lead is one of your team members who is a college student who is scheduling the weekly team meetings. So the person on point identified as your team lead should be sending out the meeting requests, should be making sure through GroupMe that everybody is on board with that date and time and that everybody is able to attend. So it's not enough just to send the meeting requests. We have to make sure everybody's holding each other accountable to actually showing up in this all virtual world. So please, hold each other accountable, just not the team lead, but hold each other accountable to make sure you guys are all meeting together in a coordinated fashion. And then the team lead will also coordinate the weekly team agenda with the mentor. The mentor is a professional in the startup community who has agreed to volunteer. So we really appreciate all the mentors, and we may have some mentors on the call today as well. So thank you for agreeing to support and be a part of this pitch competition. We're really excited to have you. And then the planning team contact is going to be touching base with the team lead. So the planning team contact is a great group of about 7 high school and college students who we recruited early on to put together this competition, to build the framework. They've selected the prizes, and they've been a great sounding board and a great team. We meet weekly, and they've been very instrumental in the construction of this pitch competition. So we're excited to have them participate as well. And they're also on your teams so that they're participating in the pitch too. So the mentor advisor, the responsibility for the mentor advisor we've outlined is to meet with the team 1 hour a week. So the team lead is going to get the mentor schedule first and make sure that the mentor is able to participate. We want to get all of those meetings scheduled up front because everybody has busy lives. So we want to make sure that we have the best opportunity to get everybody together virtually to meet weekly. So the team lead will start with the mentor schedule, and then we'll let you all know and coordinate schedules accordingly. The mentor also provides direct coaching and advises the team, can be a sounding board, and can help you identify resources. So if you get stuck or you have a bottleneck or you're not sure about a term, In the big email I sent on Friday, there was a glossary of terms, 91 terms that hopefully you all had a chance to study and take a look at over the weekend. So if you did not receive my email for some reason, please reach out to me as soon as possible, because that had a lot of information in it. It had the pitch teams in it. It had the glossary in it. It had reminder to join GroupMe. It had the consent form in it. So very important that you, if you did not get it, to reach out to me. But the mentor can help answer those questions about the terms as well. So no questions are dumb questions. So please, please, please ask if you're not sure about anything. This is meant to be a really high level learning experience. So we want you to ask a lot of questions. And then the student-led pitch planning team, as I mentioned earlier, is the one team member who is also on a pitch team, but also has the responsibility of meeting with the team lead every Thursday to check progress. So what the planning team member is going to do is they're going to look and say, okay, are there any issues or problems from team dynamics, or a problem itself, or the solution? Is the solution solved? Is the problem you're trying to solve the right solution? Not right, but a good solution. And then we'll report back to the planning team on Fridays. We meet every Friday to say, how can we brainstorm and troubleshoot and problem solve through to make sure everybody has a really great, fun, and seamless experience together. We want this to be a lot of fun as well. So those are the three groups of folks who are going to be supporting your pitch planning process through the next 5 weeks, in addition to Mike providing the weekly trainings. And then a couple other quick notes: you're competing against each other. So we're going to have, right now we have 16 teams of 5 to 6 students. You will be in competition, and you'll learn a little bit more about the judging criteria in a minute along with that. And, this is a great opportunity to learn from each other as well. So please lean into each other. Treat this as a fun way to spend the summer. We hope you'll enjoy it, and just really focus on the learning around it as well. And then as we go into the competition framework itself, each team is going to present their idea to a panel of 3 judges. It's a 5-minute pitch, a 4-minute Q&A, and a 1 minute to transition to the next team. The judges panel will include someone from the startup community, from the corporate, as well as the venture capital community. You will receive a PowerPoint template deck to use for your pitch, and you'll receive that towards the end of the month, the end of July, at the 4th training. Mike will be sharing that with you. And then the top 2 teams will be recognized. So we have a first place team and a runner-up team, and we're really excited about the prizes. So the prizes we had for Start Blocks, the planning team go through a free trial subscription, and it is really cool. And I'm going to send you all the YouTube links. We wanted the prizes to be business focused. The team felt that was really important, and so you'll learn a lot more about Start Blocks when I send you the information. But it's basically how to build your business, and this is a platform that startups are using to actually build their business. And you'll be sitting on the Centrifuge platform, so you also get, with your 1-year membership to Centrifuge, a lot of good information on programming throughout the year. Additionally, the winning team will win $1,500. So if you have an idea that you want to take forward as a team, you can reinvest that money into the team. Or if you decide that you're not going to move forward with your idea, we would split that accordingly. Let's say if there's 6 on the team, you'd each get $250, and we would want you to apply it to some skills, to build your skills in some way, whether it's getting a Canva subscription or getting an Adobe subscription. But we're hoping that you would use it to further your skills. And then also, Pete has graciously agreed to a team shadow day. Pete is the CEO of Centrifuge. He is the one who had this idea for the summer. We have to give him all the credit. He was just thinking, oh my gosh, students don't have camps this summer. They don't have internships this summer. We need to give them a really great experience. And so he is very excited and stays very close to the planning of this. And he's really excited to have this team shadow day with the winning team. And that'll take place in August or September. Hopefully we'll be able to do it in person. We'll have to see whether or not we can do that at that time, but we'll schedule it accordingly and in a safe way. And then the runner-up will also have the opportunity to be engaged with the ecosystem as well, scheduling a lunch. Again, we're hoping that that can be in person this fall, but we'll have to see with a couple startup founders, a corporate partner, and the Centrifuge Director of Startups and Service Operations, John Steger, who you heard from last Thursday. So he really helped to kick off the program at the beginning and is really excited to join you all as well.
Hey, Zan, we had one question pop up as you went through things.
Yeah.
Is the weekly agenda meeting with the mentor, is it just with the team lead, or is it the mentor and the team lead and the mentor, or is it with the whole team?
So the weekly agenda, so let's go back to that one for a minute. We'll go back to that slide.
All right, give me a second.
So
here.
oh, that's okay. Okay, that's okay.
There you go.
Okay, so just to clarify that the team lead and the mentor work together to coordinate the agenda for the week, and then they share that with the team. Now the team, feel free to have input however you all want to do it. I just wanted to make sure we had one point of contact and accountability to set an agenda.
Great.
But each team can handle it as they'd like.
Okay. And once again, if you have questions as we go through here, feel free to type them into the Q&A section, and we'll stop along the way to try to answer those.
Yes.
And so the judging criteria for everybody, you'll get a sheet on this in a couple of weeks here, as well as a pitch template. But basically, it'll be things like identifying your problem. Is it a big problem? Is it something that causes a lot of pain? Is it something worth solving? How is your solution going to solve that problem? And then how are you going to execute that? What's your business plan behind your idea to actually make that happen? And then how effective was your presentation overall? So we'll have more information around that, but that's the way to kind of think about the pitch contest and how it'll be judged overall. But let me just give you some keys to success. So here's my 7 keys to success if you're interested in doing really well in this pitch contest. So first of all, as Ann said, attend each Monday session. By the way, we are recording these. So if you miss one, you can always go back and look at it, but we're going to do lots of training overall. So it's really important that you attend the Monday sessions. And for sure, you want to make sure at least a couple members of your team are there. Number 2 is there's going to be weekly exercises. And you'll see that today. I'm going to train and show you some tools, but I want you to use those tools to help move your pitch competition ideas forward. So make sure you go and do the weekly exercises. It's going to take some time. I'm estimating you probably are going to want to invest between 3 to 5 hours per week overall in that. Sorry for the airplane flying over my head here. And then the mentor should attend your 1-hour meeting. But if you really want to do well, your team members, you want to put aside time to go work on this. Work as a team. You are purposely in teams of 5 or 6 people. We want diversity. We want different kinds of thinking. We want you to kind of build on each other's ideas. So work as a team, then you'll be most effective. Today, we'll talk about solving problems, but solve an important problem. And we'll define what important problems look like. But the goal overall to be successful in this pitch competition is identify an important problem and then figure out a way to solve it. And that's ultimately what a good pitch is all about. Think big. I really want to encourage you to think big. There's not a better time than right now to come up with some really big ideas. So think big and push yourself to create some amazing new ideas. And I just know we're going to have that. Every time I've been involved in these pitch competitions, it's amazing some of the ideas that students your age come up with. And you guys think about the world differently than some of us older adults. And I really want to encourage you to take things on and bring some ideas forward that are going to change the world. And we'll talk a little bit about some of those possibilities. And then finally, have fun. This is work, but it also should be fun too. Whether or not, however you do in this pitch competition, guess what? There's lots of pitch competitions down the road, lots of opportunities to do this further. If you do get a new venture going, quite often new ventures participate in pitch competitions all the time. It's a great way to raise money on the side, get visibility for your product and the like. but have fun as you kind of go along this process. So those are my 7 keys to success overall. So let's just jump right into week 1 training. So today, it's all about problem identification. Entrepreneurs solve problems. Ultimately, that's what entrepreneurs do. We look at the world differently. We think and look and identify and analyze problems and figure out what are the problems that we need to solve. And that's what I want to share with you today. We're going to go through a number of tools today that I'm going to share with you. And by the way, so this training, you guys are in an amazing ecosystem here in Cincinnati. We have wonderful schools who do great entrepreneurship curriculums. UC, Miami, NKU, Xavier, Dayton, all have great entrepreneurship programs. And this is the kind of training and information you can get access to and participate in your curriculum. In addition, we've got things like accelerators, which are, think of them as kind of learning shops for startups to get going on and really give them the coaching and help they need. So some of these tools I'm going to share with you today are the exact tools that we use in our college curriculums and in our accelerators. So these will hopefully be useful things for you, not only for this pitch competition, but going further forward as you decide to participate in entrepreneurship. Okay, so now I want everybody to type into chat. So go down to your chat box, and I want you to type in what startup or innovative, and it could be a company, or it could be a product, or it could be a service, do you admire most? Just type in the chat box. I'm going to kind of just look through the list here. Feel free to look at the list also yourself. Which companies do you admire the most? SpaceX, Tesla, Amazon, another Tesla, 3 Teslas, Uber, another Tesla, Social Capital, Patagonia, great one, SpaceX, Apple, Google, Netflix, SpaceX, Patagonia, Fit, Outdoor Voices, Cotopaxi, another Uber, Abigo, SpaceX, Allbirds, Virgin Galactic, SpaceX, Girl Boss Community. Any others? Amazon, Ecosia, Starlink. Some of these I don't even know. These are great ones. I'm going to save this list. We'll actually save this chat and we'll put this list together so everybody can see the list that everybody's typing out. Okay, you guys are just rattling off some absolutely amazing companies. We're going to talk about a few of these actual companies here because when you look at successful, innovative companies, what you'll find is they've typically started by solving problems. So we're going to do a couple different case studies here that I want to go through here to kind of set the stage. So the first one I want to talk about is Airbnb. So recall Airbnb got started in 2008. So flashback to 2008, I was actually running one of my startups. The world changed in October of 2008. The financial banking system collapsed. We went into a major recession for about 2 years. People lost their jobs. It was a pretty scary period. Well, here is Airbnb launching their business in 2008 and actually have grown to be highly successful now 12 years later. Obviously, they're feeling some of the pain of the current pandemic, but they'll get through that overall. So here's how this business started. So Airbnb, there was 3 roommates in San Francisco who were living together, and they had a high monthly rent of, I think it was about $2,500 or $3,000 a month. And they looked and said, you know what, we're going to have trouble making our rent payment this month because we're not sure we got enough money to make the rent payment. And then one of them came up with the idea, well, what if we could rent out one of our rooms? You know, lots of people are coming to San Francisco for conferences and other stuff, but hotels are really expensive. Maybe we could rent out one of our rooms and actually get some money for rent for us, as well as, offer a more affordable housing opportunity for somebody coming for a conference. So what they took is they took one of their rooms, they posted on, I think it was Craigslist, I believe, and basically said, you can sleep at their place. And I think it was about $75 a night. And basically they found 3 people who said yes. They got 3 air mattresses and threw them on the floor of the bedroom and filled that room up over the weekend. And that's where they got the name Airbnb, because they were using air mattresses. The 3 people who stayed there absolutely had a great time. They saved a lot of money. The roommates were able to make their rent payment. So they solved the problem. They had a problem, and their guests had a problem of finding something affordable. And so their overall pitch of what they're about is price is an important concern for travelers. Travelers are concerned about price. Hotels leave you disconnected from cities and cultures. You really don't get to know what's going on locally and where to go and places to do. And then finally, if you want to kind of rent out a room, there was no easy way to do it. There was this thing called couch surfing and other stuff, but nobody had really made it easy to kind of monetize and rent out a room and become a host. So that's what their solution came up with. How do you save money when traveling? How do you make money when hosting? And how can you share the culture? Ultimately, they solved those 3 problems with their business idea. As an interestingly side note, they did struggle for the first 3 years. They thought they had a good idea. They had a number of people using the website, but they weren't getting as much as they thought they were going to get. And they were started out in San Francisco, and then they launched in New York, and it had about 1,000 listings in New York City. And they said, why is the business not taking off there? And then they started to look at things, and they figured out another problem they had. The people that were listing their properties in New York City had great properties. They had lousy pictures. They took lousy pictures of their property or had no pictures. And so people who were looking to potentially rent those properties for the weekend or for a few days had no idea what they really looked like. And so all of a sudden, what they decided to do is, let's go hire photographers, and we'll send those to the host places, and we'll actually take good professional pictures and post those for the host. And it was well worth the investment, because these properties in New York City could rent for $300 a night, and because New York's very expensive. And all of a sudden their listings took off, and they started to shoot right up. So there's even a company that was somewhat successful initially, and they identified yet another problem later on that really then helped further accelerate their business once they solved that problem. So that's my example of showing how Airbnb solved problems. Let's go on to another one. Let's talk about Uber. Okay, Uber, basically the guys who started Uber said, you know what? Using a taxi is not a great experience. But interesting enough, you can make a very broad statement like that. And it wasn't until they started to pull apart all the things about using a taxi that was not a great experience and dissect that problem further that they really got into some of the key things they wanted to solve. So here's some of the sub-problems. If you were in a city and traveling like New York City, to get a taxi on the corner, sometimes you were competing with 3 or 4 other people, and it was hard sometimes to get a taxi. And it was you had to wait for one. And then if you were going to the airport, they didn't necessarily want to pick you up and all that stuff. So getting a taxi was hard. Scheduling a cab ride. You'd call the taxi service and say, okay, I need to leave for the airport at 6:30. And you kind of hope they showed up at 6:30, but sometimes they'd show up at 7, and all of a sudden then you said, well, I guess I got to schedule even a half hour earlier because I'm not even sure if they're going to show up. Then you get into the cabs, and some of the cabs are pretty run down. And then sometimes you get pretty bad drivers, people who, you're not even quite sure what, is this somebody safe for me to hop in the cab with? Do they really know where they're going? Is the driver getting there the most efficient way? These guys are running off the meter, the cabs, are. So are they going to take the longest route to run up the meter? I'm not even sure how much my ride's going to cost. You'd hop in a taxi in New York City, and how much is it going to cost me to get to LaGuardia Airport? Well, sometimes it costs me $25, other times it costs me $45, just depending upon what route the guy took. And then finally, it was really hard to pay with anything but cash. I couldn't pay with a credit card very easy. And so that's where some of the problems that Uber identified that were sub-problems about getting a taxi. And so they really dissected it further, and that's where they then came up with their solutions. So they've got an app, and you guys have all used this, I know. It's one-click hailing. I can basically pick up and be here in 5 minutes. The drivers know these are members only who have got ratings, and you get rated yourself, and they can kind of trust you in general. They optimize their fleet. They're able to get the closest cars to you as quickly as possible. It's much easier than calling, get really fast response. You get some nice automobiles, especially since a lot of the Uber drivers, that's their main business. So they're keeping their automobiles nice and clean and in good shape and all that. And some very high-tech solutions. They're really aware of where you are. And then you get to rate the drivers and you get to read the ratings on the drivers. So you got much better kind of full system. And guess what? Not much of this is new technology. In fact, quite frankly, they didn't invent any new technology. They just used existing technology to build this entire business. But it all started by figuring out what's the problems and why is a taxi cab experience so bad? Final case study I want to take you through. Lime. I'm sure many of you use Lime or Bird. You know, they're both very, very similar. So some of the problems that Lime identified, traveling around a city can be very time consuming. You know, there's lots of traffic sometimes. And if I want to get from one end of the city to the other, a cab is going to be slow. Getting a cab is hard. I can walk, but that's going to take too much time. So it's very time consuming when you're in a city environment to move around. College campuses, for those of you who are at college, I mean, how big is your campus? How long does it take you to get from one end of campus to the other? That can still be somewhat time consuming. Gas-powered vehicles are hurting the environment. A lot of people are concerned about that. It takes time to walk to and from public transit. A lot of people are saying, you know what? I would love to use Lime, but and it would be a great way for me to get to and from the bus stations. I take the bus downtown, but I still am not exactly next to my workplace. But if I could hop on a scooter, that would be great. And then many city dwellers just can't afford to use cabs. They're too expensive. So here's just some data from what Lime did and how they solved these problems. So first of all, in their original Portland scooter pilot, in 120 days, they estimated they saved 9,677 gallons of fuel. So for the people who cared about the environment, that was a big benefit. In addition, this is data that they actually collected. What was the last time people used Lime, and this is the same study in Portland, I believe, to get to or from public transit? 39%, almost 40% in the last week used Lime to get to and from public transport. So they're basically hopping on a train, coming into a city, and then hopping on a Lime, or taking the bus in there and hopping on a Lime. It's a very interesting kind of way to further connect communities. So basically, I take public transportation to get into the main area, and then I hop on a Lime. And then finally, 50% of the people, or 34% of Lime riders, report an annual income of $50,000 or less. So what Lime does is actually offers discounts for people in low-income communities and who have non-smartphone access and things like that. And really, it's become a great traveling mechanism for inner-city dwellers who can't really afford to hop in a cab and some of those things. So once again, Lime solved the problems. So hopefully you're seeing a theme here. What are the problems, and then how do we potentially solve them? And once again, all three of these companies really didn't invent any new technology. They just used existing technology and applied it to business problems that are out there today. So the other piece I also want to clearly communicate with you is customers don't buy products or services. Customers buy solutions to their problems. And so we're going to talk today about the problem side of it. How do we identify the problems? And then next week, we'll talk about how do we actually begin identifying solutions to those problems. But today's all about figuring out how do we actually move forward and solve problems. Okay, so here's your first team's goal. You're going to want to identify what problem you want to solve. As a team, each team needs to identify what problem you want to solve. And I'm going to want you to get to that point by next week. Now, you may identify a couple problems you want to try to solve, but let me just start with some starting themes here. And some of these came from Pete's initial email out to everybody when we talked about this program. So first of all, COVID-19. You know, we've got, tons of problems there. It's affecting people of color disproportionately. It's creating mental and physical, emotional wellness issues. We have to live in this no-touch world. We're working remotely, and sometimes that doesn't work. Okay, lots of problems are coming out of COVID-19. Are there some themes, or is there some problems in there that you might want to solve? Social injustice. How can we take some of this radical new ways to address systemic racism, implicit biasness, inequality, and really kind of address some of those issues? Sustainability. You know, United Nations has got some great sustainability goals of zero hunger and clean energy. Are there things there that we cannot do that we haven't imagined yet? Or maybe there's just something else entirely off the radar scope of any of these ideas. The bottom line is, let's figure out what problem you want to solve. Now, as we go into the pitch competition here, today we're going to talk about problem solving. I think there's a couple teams who may already even have a problem and a solution they maybe want to start working on already, and that's fine. Some of you already may have an idea for something you want to go solve, and you've already thought about some solutions. That's fine. But today, I really want to focus just on the problem. So take a look at some of the tools I'm going to show you here and see how can you apply them to identify and solve, or identify the problems that you want to go solve. So here's going to be your homework for week 1. I'm going to bring this slide back in the end, but I just want to tell you where we're going. So basically, each of your team members is going to identify 5 problems. I'll talk a little bit about how that works. You're going to then meet as a team to share those problems, and I'm going to show you how to cluster and edit those. You're going to pick 3 problems as a team, and then I'm going to give you some tools, a fishbone diagram, a value proposition map, and show you how to develop a good problem statement. That's what I'm going to go through here in the next 20, 30 minutes here, okay? But that's what the homework's going to be. I'm going to bring this back at the end. I just want to kind of tell you where we're going, but this is kind of the week-to-week stuff that we're going to kind of work our way through. Okay, so let's move forward here. Okay, so where do you start? Okay, so here's how I want to encourage everybody to go do. I want you to think about broad topics. I want you to think about problems that you have a passion for solving. Entrepreneurs are passionate. It's hard to solve a problem that you're not passionate about. So think about, identify things that you would say, you know what, this is something I have a passion for solving. I also want you to also think about problems that are important, okay? Figuring out how to develop an app to find Mexican, restaurants is probably not that important a problem. Yes, it could be done, but is it going to make a difference in the world? No, we've got apps to find restaurants and other things like that. So it's probably not an important problem. Think about problems that are important. Think about problems where you may have some expertise or knowledge about. The more knowledge and expertise you have around a problem area, that's also an interesting place to start. So here's going to be step 1. Each of you have 5 or 6 team members on your team. So I want each team member individually identify and write out 5 problems that you would like to solve. And then you're going to bring that homework to your first team meeting. So your team lead's going to set up your first team meeting. So prior to that team meeting, I want each team member to bring in and write out 5 specific problems they want to solve. And I'll then show you how your team is then going to work with those problems initially. Okay, so here's going to be your first team meeting. You're going to go build an electronic whiteboard with everybody's problem. Each person's going to have 5 problems, and we're going to kind of put them into electronic Post-its. I'm going to show you how to do that in a second here. You're going to then cluster those common problems together on your whiteboard. And the reason we're doing this kind of electronically on whiteboard, if you could meet face-to-face, I'd be having you meet on whiteboards and write things out and use Post-it notes and all that stuff. Well, guess what? We're in the world of virtualness now. So we're going to try to do this all virtually, and I'll show you some tools you can do that. And then you're going to take all these problems. So if you've got 6 people, you're going to have 30 problems. You're going to then kind of cluster them together and kind of move the clusters together and find where you have some common problems together. You're probably going to have some very similar problems you guys are going to identify. You might want to combine some of them. You may want to edit and change some of the words. But as a team, work on those and kind of come up with this master whiteboard of all the potential problem statements that you want to solve. And then what I'm going to ask you to do in that first team meeting is pick 3 of those problem statements that you really want to explore. So let's talk about what that might look like, okay? And I've kind of worked up a example of how this might work. So follow me through on this. Okay, so I did this whiteboard on PowerPoint. So you can easily create like electronic Post-it notes you can put in PowerPoint. I'm going to show you a tool here in a second that will do it the same way. Well, let's imagine we gathered everybody's idea, and these were some of the ideas. So the first person says, major problem, people don't wear masks in public. Okay, that's a really good problem. Somebody else said, well, the restaurants are struggling to survive. True. Use of plastic is ruining the environment. Very true. Another problem, we have increased tensions between police departments and the community. We've got racial tensions because of lack of understanding. We've got millions of families facing hunger this summer as we go through the recession, and people who have lost their jobs and are really struggling to survive. We've got elementary children having difficulty learning remotely. You know, it's easier in high school and college, but elementary school age is really hard. We've got many restaurants that aren't set up for the increasing demand of takeout orders. Takeout's taken off, but a lot of restaurants don't even know how to do takeout or aren't set up for it. Older citizens have fear of going out in public. Daycare options for parents are more limited. There's less daycare. Can I put my child in a daycare that's going to be safe for them from COVID and things like that? I only need daycare 2 days a week because I've got to be home with them the other 3 days of the week. So my options are limited. People are feeling more isolated. Stress, mental health issues are at an all-time high right now. Recycling programs have limited success. You know, we've got recycling programs, but people aren't participating as well as they could. Teenagers are being bullied by others. It's hard to find college or high school internships this summer. Or we have not found enough ways to celebrate and recognize diversity and inclusion. I made these up. I'm not suggesting these are the problems you should do. I just simply said, okay, what might a team's list of problems might be? So what you want to do is first just kind of put these all out in a whiteboard and kind of put them together, and then you can move these around really easy and organize them. And so here's the next step. I've taken those same problems and I've kind of grouped them now. So I mentioned 3 problems earlier. I've colored those in orange, the exact same problems, but I've kind of put those up as racial issues. Restaurants, I have 2 problems grouped there. Children issues, I've got 2 up there. Emotional issues, 3 there. Environmental issues there. And then I've got some wild cards that don't really match up with anything else. But I want you to then take those 30 that you have, organize them, and put them together and then bucket them together. Because when you bucket them together, you might then decide, I want to combine 1 or 2, or I want to tweak 1. And then I want you to look at this as a team and pick 3 of these that you want to work further on. So that'll be the hard part, okay? Which 3 of these do I actually want to work on as a team as we go through? And you probably have to have a team vote and all that and agree on the 3 you want to go work on. Now, to go build your tool, here's another, besides PowerPoint, I built the previous one in PowerPoint. There's a great tool. You can get a free account. It's myro.com. It creates a whiteboard. It's got all sorts of templates on it. It's a great tool to actually use even for college or high school too when you're doing a teamwork and all that stuff. So if you go to myro.com, you can start a whiteboard, sign up for a free account. You can share it with multiple team members. You can email links to your whiteboards together. It's really simple to do. So I encourage you to go look at that if you want a whiteboard tool instead of using something like PowerPoint. So you're going to have those 30 problems up there. And how do you actually go figure out which of the 3 that we want to go work on? Well, here's some questions I want you to think about. What's the severity of that problem? How big a problem is it? How important is it to solve that problem? How many customers actually have that problem? Are there a lot of people out there with that problem? It might be a very severe problem, but if not many customers have it, then it may not be something you want to focus on. If a lot of people have it, then it might be very much worth it. Sometimes problems are out there and there's ways that people are kind of doing workarounds or trying to deal with them. What are some of the ways that people are trying to deal with the problem now? And you may then find, you know what, none of those solutions really work. It's kind of a workaround. It kind of gets to the problem, but not really. Or there might be current solutions that are out there to the problem, but they aren't as good as they could be. And you might say, you know what, we can develop a better solution to that problem. Here's a real key question. If you solve that problem, would customers be willing to pay you for it? Because guess what? If they're not willing to pay you for it, it's probably hard to go build a business around it. You've really got to have a problem that people are willing to solve and then pay you for that problem. So Airbnb, people who are hosts are willing to use that because they get, Airbnb takes about 10% of the revenue, but they get free income or additional income for renting their room, okay? They're willing to kind of share that revenue. And then the final one is, how likely is your team of 5 or 6, be able to come up with a solution to that problem? And guess what? Sometimes problems are super hard. You may identify a really hard one, but if it's too hard and you guys don't have too much expertise in that area or any ideas in that area, then that might not be a good problem to do. So, but think about these questions as you pick your 30. And so going back then to the next slide here. At the bottom here, here's another way to think about problems. first of all, there's problems which it's nice to have a solution to. Then there's problems which I want to have a solution to. Then there's problems that are essential to have a solution to. So as an example, if I had something that, made it easy for people to breathe indoors who, when they wanted to, and just kind of made it easier when they're running and things like that, like the nose strip. Okay, that's kind of maybe a nice to have. If I had something that actually eliminated secondary smoke in, rooms, that might be a really want to have. And then finally, if I have an asthma device that actually dramatically helps asthma patients when they get into an issue, that's essential to have. So there's 3 air products, which that's the difference between nice to have, to want to have, to essential to have. So if we can find products that, have want to haves and essentials to have, a lot better chance of success overall. So you're going to take those 30 ideas, and then I want you to pick 3. So in this example here, I just pulled up the same example. You might pick these 3 that we're going to work on as a team. Restaurants are struggling to survive. We've not found enough ways to celebrate and recognize diversity and inclusion, and people don't wear masks in public. So those might be the 3 that you're going to kind of go pick initially to do. And the reason I'm having you pick 3 right now is you're going to kind of do some further work on these problems, and then you're going to get it down to 1 or 2 of these that you're going to really focus on. But I want you to start with 3 and go through the additional exercises I show you here, and then we'll get you zeroed into finally 1 or 2. Okay, but this is the first step. You're going to go from 30 down to 3. Okay. All right. That's let me just stop there. I want to look at the question bank here and see if there's any questions here. Give me a second here. Q&A. Okay. When we think about a problem we'd like to solve, should we also think about a solution, or is that a next step? Great question. I don't want you to get into solutions right now. Okay. Separate that out. Too often, we jump to trying to figure out the solution to the problem. Next week, we're going to talk about how to think about solutions. So I really want you to focus first and foremost about problems you want to solve. Let's see. How do businesses like Pinterest, Instagram, Twitter with free services make an income? So Pinterest and Twitter and Instagram all sell advertising space. So when you see ads in there, even though it's free for the consumer, they're selling their real estate when you see ads coming through your feed, or companies encouraging you to click on a link to go somewhere and the like. And so they're making their income off of businesses that are basically advertising to users of those social medias. Very common way for those to be made. Any other questions here? Make sure I didn't. Yeah, okay, good. All right. Okay, so let's move on. Hopefully everybody's still with me. This is being recorded, so if you've missed anything, you can go back and look at the recording. Okay. I want to talk about dissecting a problem, because once you start with a problem, you probably want to further dissect it. And problems are often very complex. There's kind of sub-problems within problems. Some of your problems may be very broad that you guys kind of post up. Some of them may be too narrow. Some of your problems may be very hard to solve. Well, guess what? That's okay for picking your first 3. I'm not worried about that, because we're going to go through some tools here that will help further get you into the problem-solving mode. So first thing I want to talk about is dissecting a problem. Okay, some of you may have used this in the past. There is a tool called a fishbone diagram. The reason it's called a fishbone diagram is because it looks like a fish. Basically, you've got the backbone of the fish here, and then you've got kind of pieces coming off the side. But here's how you go build a fishbone diagram. You might be a company and you say, our problem is low customer satisfaction. And that's kind of a high-level problem. And then you might say, well, why do we have low customer satisfaction? And the key question in here is why, when you do a fishbone diagram. So what are some of the causes of low customer satisfaction? Well, it might be our pricing is too high, our product quality is too low, and we have poor customer support. And you say, okay, well, those are 3 smaller pieces, but even each of those is a little bit out of whack. Well, why do we have why is high pricing a problem? Well, maybe it should be high price, but our marketing is ineffective. Or maybe it is our cost of materials are so high that we have to price it high. And a low product quality. Why do we have low product quality? Well, we use poor materials, or maybe we have a bad design, or maybe we have incompetent employees. And then poor support. You know, why do we have bad customer support? We have the wrong answers, long hold times, there's a fee structure. The bottom line is this all of a sudden identifies low customer satisfaction and breaks it into a bunch of sub problems that might be the key one that you want to focus on solving. And so I'm going to kind of go through that exercise here with a restaurant example. But basically, I want you to take each of your problems here, and I want you to go do the fishbone diagram exercise. So let's put into a real example of one we just talked about. Okay, so recall that one of the problems I talked about is restaurants are struggling. Okay, well, why are restaurants struggling? That's the first question you ask yourself. Why are restaurants struggling? Well, I came up with 6 big buckets of why they're struggling today. First of all, customers have fear of going to restaurants. Secondly, some of them are not set up for takeout. It's hard to get employees right now. Traffic is dependent upon events in the area. Profits are dramatically reduced, and regulations limit indoor seating. So those are my 6 broad areas. I then went into each of those and asked another question. Well, why are customers fear of going into restaurants? Well, some of the questions they're asking is eating inside a restaurant safe? Could I get COVID from servers or cooks? Could I pick up COVID where others sat before me? Those might be some of the sub problems. Not set up for takeout. Well, why are restaurants not set up for takeout? Well, it's hard for them to deliver a good meal via takeout. Their meals don't kind of transport very well. The delivery service charges make it unprofitable. For all of you, by the way, who are using DoorDash and Uber Eats, they charge a restaurant about 30% of the cost of the meal for delivery. So a lot of restaurants who are doing takeout are making no money on when it gets delivered. So it's a very expensive charge for restaurants. Or, you know, for some restaurants, there's no easy way to promote their takeout menu broadly. Hard to get employees. Right now, restaurants are having trouble getting some of their employees coming back, mainly because some of them are making more money on unemployment. So some of them are actually staying home purposely, don't want to go back to work because the way the government set things up, they could actually make more money on unemployment. Some of their employees have fear of COVID. This is a high turnover industry. Another reason for hard to get employees. Traffic dependent upon areas in the events. If you're a restaurant in an area near a baseball or football stadium, guess what? You're way down. If you're a restaurant, you know, near a concert area or local entertainment stuff, your business is way down. Profits are being dramatically reduced. They're getting less revenue because most people, you know, are basically, you know, during peak periods, there's only limited seating. I only have so much seating. So people come out Friday and Saturday nights and I don't have seating for everybody. And people are only really going out on weekend nights. Plus, I actually have to now spend more money to keep my restaurants clean and safe with masks and sanitizer and things like that. And regulations limiting out indoor seating. Indoor seating has been dramatically reduced. I may lose opportunity when my seating is full. I may have limited or no outdoor seating. So now all of a sudden I take this restaurant struggling piece and I've identified all these sub-problems. I may then want to pick one of these sub-problems to go work on. You know, and I may just say, you know what, guys, let's not focus on everything for restaurants. Let's focus on some of the takeout issues. How can we go help restaurants do better takeout? Well, let's go figure out how we can do a delivery service that's less expensive than DoorDash or Uber Eats. You know, or let's go figure out how we can reduce customer fear for going to restaurants by putting together programs that help inspect restaurants or things of that nature. So now I've taken a big problem, I've dissected into sub problems. So I'm going to want you to do this for all 3 of your problems. I want you to kind of do your best fishbone diagrams because this may help you then refine your problem statements and really zero in. How do you get to these? Start by taking your big problem and saying, why are restaurants struggling? Come up with big buckets. Then take each of those buckets and say, why is that happening? So why is it hard to get to employees? Then I get the subpoints there. And you'll create a diagram just like this. The Miro site I just showed you actually has this template. It's super easy to create this with this diagram. They've got a fishbone diagram. This is a great tool for analyzing problems and really diving deeper into figuring things out. So your homework is going to be to dissect each of your 3 problems that you pick and do a fishbone diagram. Okay, so that's the next step of the homework. Okay, moving further on here. Let me just see if there's any questions that popped up here. I've got a few here. Okay, when we think about a problem to solve, oh, we did that one. Okay, hold on. Any entrepreneurial tools such as empathy maps, Scamper, C4 idation. Yeah, so we are going to use some tools next week. I'm going to introduce you guys to just a few for that. So there are some tools that we'll get into the problem solving side of it. And if you've thought of potential solutions, it's okay to share them. I'm okay with that. I still just want to make sure you do a good job thinking about problems before you dive into too much of solution-based stuff. But it is okay if you've got an idea for a problem that you want to share. That might help you. I say, okay, let's go work on this problem. Just recognize that your idea may not be as good as it could be if other people in the group can really help solve that problem further by building on your idea. So, but good question there too. So let me close that one up and move on here. Okay. All right, next tool. This is called the Value Proposition Canvas. It's just another tool to kind of analyze problems and figure out, okay, is this a good problem to solve? And what are some of the sub-problems? So there's 3 buckets here. There's a organization called Strategizer that's come up with a bunch of these kinds of tools. We use them in our curriculums at universities and accelerators and the like. But the 3 buckets are customer jobs. Customer jobs are what are the customers trying to get done in their work and lives as described in their own words. And I'm going to do this one for Uber and how they would have done one of these value proposition canvases. So what are the customer jobs about getting a taxi? Gains are what are the potential outcomes that could be achieved based upon working on that problem? What are some of the things that customers might react very positively to if you could solve some of those customers' jobs? And then pains, what are some of the pains that you might eliminate by actually solving some of it related to those customer jobs? So let me put this together and show you an example of one here for Uber. And this is how Uber might have done one for their business. So they would have started with a chart like this. And basically, we're going to start with customer jobs. That's where you start first. So what are the customer jobs of getting a taxi cab? So first one is, I've got to contact a good taxi service. That's you know, I need a taxi, so I'm figuring out how do I contact a good taxi service. 2 is, I've probably got to wait for the cab for some unknown amount of time today. I want to try to control the costs of the ride and know what it's going to cost me. And then finally, I've got to pay for the trip. So those might be some of the customer jobs of getting a taxi, you know, kind of in the old days that somebody would have thought about. You know, here's some of the things that I go through as I think about getting a taxi. Okay, now we go to identify what are some of the pains associated with some of those jobs and what are some of the potential gains. Okay, so here's some pains. Well, guess what? Low cab availability is an issue. If there's only so many cabs around and I've got to wait or fight for one as I hail one in the city, or I've got to wait 30 minutes for one, that's bad. Another pain is bad drivers happen. You know, I don't know who I'm getting. I may get a bad driver. These guys really well trained, and do they have an incentive to kind of be a successful service provider? I may need to book a cab in advance because guess what? The only way I'm going to get to the airport on time is to book it in advance. Oh, and by the way, I've got to book it 30 minutes earlier than I really want to because I've got to leave enough slack time there to get to the airport. I can't be late. And so that's a pain for me. And then I might have issues with how I pay. You know, I don't want to pay in cash. I may not have $45 on me. Why don't cabs take credit cards? That's really frustrating. So that's a pain from that standpoint. So those are some customer pains associated with taxi cabs. I then may identify what are some of the gains potentially. Boy, being able to one click and order a cab would be great on my phone. Cancellation. Being able to track where my cab is and actually understand where they are and how soon they're going to be, that would be terrific. Finding a trusted driver, somebody that actually might, you know something about, that would be terrific. Oh, and if you could take 0 time for me to spend on payment, that would be terrific. And so this was the value proposition map that Uber looked at. And so this is all about identifying first, what are the customer jobs? And then what are some of the pains and gains associated with those? Not really getting into the solutions, but really just identifying what are some of the jobs people are trying to solve for and some of the pains and gains associated with that. This will then also help you further refine your problem statements and identify maybe some problems that you want to go focus on. Now, this takes a little bit of time to go do, so I'm only going to ask you to do one of these if you want for one of your 3 problems. If you want to do it for all 3 and you guys have time and energy, go for it. But I want you to at least go through this exercise once, because once again, this is a really good tool to use when it comes to problem identification. So you're basically going to do a value proposition map for one of your customers, and you can do it just the way I did. So I basically pasted it into PowerPoint, and I just created little post-its and I put them on there, and I then shared that with shared that with you guys. You guys can kind of pair up and do that as groups or individuals, and kind of work on that. So that's another step of your homework, if you will. Okay, final piece here is, how do we actually take pain points and then create jobs from this? So the interesting thing is, we've talked a lot about pain points here, and one way we sometimes also like to talk about directions to find solutions is think about pain points as every pain point has, for every product or service today, has a job to be done. You are basically hiring a company to do a job for you when you buy a product or service. You've got a job that you want to have done and you're hiring that. So when it's Uber, it's, I want to get an easy way to get a car to be mobile. And that's my job to be done. Airbnb, I want a low cost place to stay that I know is safe. That's my job to be done. So the way we kind of create those is we start with some of those pain points. So think of things like, my horse isn't faster enough. And really what the job to be done is there is people want to go faster. My helmet isn't doing a good job of protecting me from injury, so provide me with more protection. I avoid my checking account because I thought it might be lower than I thought. Well, find ways to remove anxiety around my finances. Big purchases are hard when you can't try the product before you buy it. Well, find ways to remove the risk from big ticket items. Those are the jobs to be done. And then what we do is we tend to frame those jobs to be done as how might we, and I'll show you some of those statements here next. And this is how a well-framed problem statement looks. So here are some how might we's from some of the stuff we've already talked about. How might we drive additional revenue to restaurants during non-peak hours? That would be a good problem statement. How might we create ways for elder family members to stay more connected while they're isolated during the pandemic? How might we create ways for people to celebrate and recognize the benefits of diversity and inclusion? How might we create more learning internships for high school and college students? How might we deliver lower cost delivery options for restaurant takeout orders? How might we get a higher percentage of the population to wear masks when in public? How might we get more people to participate in existing recycling programs? How might we reduce bullying of teenagers and provide support when it does happen? How might we capitalize on the recent Black Lives Matter movement to make real long-term change? So those are all pain points and problems reframed in a job to be done. So this is where I want you to get to with your problem statements, okay? And we want to get focused on some problem statements that you're going to go work on from a solution standpoint next week. Oh, one more here. How might we provide more flexible and affordable options for daycare for parents who are balancing crazy work at home schedules and school schedules with their kids? What's going to happen this fall is, it looks like kids are probably going to school a couple days a week and they'll be at home the rest of the week. Well, guess what? That messes up with traditional daycare. And some parents may still have to work at home because of the way their office is. So how could we create some affordable and flexible ways for daycare in today's new world to kind of get through the current piece? So those are the how might we. So I want you to get to that piece of it. Okay, now I've gone full circle. Here's the homework side I brought up before. Week 1, each of your team members individually identifies 5 problems. You're going to then bring those to your first team meeting. That's going to give you 25 to 30 problems to look at initially. You're going to then organize and meet and share those problems, build a map, cluster the ones that are similar together, combine them, edit them, figure out, look at all those. Figure out which problems you want to go solve. I gave you a slide of thinking about which ones you might want to go solve. They have to be important. They have to be things you feel there's lots of people that have that problem, things like that. And as a group, you're going to pick 3 problems as a team. Once you have those 3 problems as a team, I want you to dissect each problem with a fishbone diagram. We've gone through that. For one of those problems, I want you to do a value proposition map. You can do it for more, but for one of them, I want you to do a value proposition map. And then this is going to create lots of data for you, lots of problem data for you to look at. Do not throw it away. Keep it around, okay? Because that will be helpful to you when you even get into the ideation piece and the like. But I want you to then pick one or two problems, and you may rewrite some of your initial problem statements after you do this fishbone diagram and value proposition map, and develop a really clear problem statement. And I only want you to get down to one or two. And it's okay if they're totally different. So if one is kind of related to recycling and one's related to helping children, get educated at home, that's fine. That's perfectly okay. But I don't want you to get to more than two problems, because you're going to want to focus all your ideation on one or two problems. So from here this week, you're basically going down from 30 to 3 and eventually to 1 or 2. Okay, you can try to do this all in one meeting. You might try to do it in a couple meetings, but those are the various pieces overall. Let me go jump into and look at some of the questions here. We are, before we pull up the next poll here. All right, let's see. More questions here. I think I saw one more pop up here. Do you recommend pitching a nonprofit? Great question. So it is perfectly okay to be a nonprofit, okay? In fact, there's really 3 kinds of ventures that are okay. And so one is, obviously, there's things that are for profit. There's others that it may be a total nonprofit idea where you're basically just trying to break even and cover your costs, but you're going to, be creating something that's going to help people. That's perfectly fine. And then there's kind of something in between, which I kind of call, or that we call in the marketplace, a social venture. And what a social venture tends to do sometimes is they might make profit, but they also may do something really good for society. And that's okay too. So it's totally okay. It doesn't have to be profit. It could be nonprofit, or it could be this social venture, which is kind of in between. And then for the pitch competition, won't we eventually need just one problem to solve? And yes, that is exactly right. So we're going to go from 1 or 2 problems to, you're going to then do the solution stuff next week. And by the end of week 2, you're going to have one problem and one initial solution you're going to work on, okay? We're going to get focused in that. So 2 weeks from today, you ought to be on, here's the problem and here's our initial idea around the solution that we're going to work on. And then we'll build out further what's needed to really answer that solution even further. Okay, so let's see. Zaina, are there any questions that popped up in chat that we need to answer?
So there's one from Trip asking, is a social venture the same as a B Corp?
Yes, actually, very similar. So a B Corp is a legal organization, kind of like an LLC, a partnership, a proprietorship, a C Corp. So a B Corp is basically a company that makes profit and also does social good. A social venture doesn't have to be organized as a B Corp. All B Corps, I guess by definition, are social ventures. But you could have an organization that's a, LLC, which is really a social venture. But yes, they're very, very similar. Anything else?
There's also someone raising their hand, so I'm going to allow them to talk really fast.
Oh, okay. How are we doing on time, by the way?
We have 15 minutes left.
Oh, good. Great. We're in good shape.
Yes.
Okay.
Mwenda, I just allowed you to speak. If not, you can type your question in the chat as well. Okay, never mind.
Okay. Okay. Another question just popped up here. For the pitch competition, won't we eventually? Oh, I did that one already. Okay. Sorry. I did that one. Okay. Any more? Oh, are we really going to need to turn in our charts? Oh, the answer is no. I'm not going to ask you to turn it in, but do the work. Okay. Because the work will really help you. Now, what will be really helpful though is for your mentors. If you have the work, they can kind of look at the work with you and kind of comment on it. Plus, myself and others will be available if you guys want to share some stuff with us and get any feedback. So if you do some of the charts, they also may help us kind of further figure out and give you some counsel as you kind of move things forward, okay? Any other questions anybody want to type in? I've got another poll coming up here in a second here. All right. So let me, let's go to our next and final poll here. Let's see. Okay. How excited are you to be in this program? Ramped up and ready to go. What did I get myself into? A bit nervous, but I'm glad I'm here. Take no prisoners. All the other teams are playing for second. Or I'm ready to change the world. Pick whichever answer fits best. Everybody try to answer this question before we close it. Love to see where the energy level is. All right, let's close the poll and see what the results are. Take no prisoners, and everybody's playing for second. 31% of you. Well, guess what? There's only one first place team. This will be a great, great competition. And for you that are nervous, don't worry about it. This is all about learning. And quite frankly, this is a very fast pitch competition and training program. 5 weeks is really short. When we normally do this at an accelerator in the universities, it's a 12 to 15 week program. But you're going to get access and learn a little bit about some of the tools and things that go into this. So this will be great experience going forward and all that stuff. Love the fact we've got 15% of you ready to change the world. For those of you worried about what you got yourself into, just roll with it. You're going to have lots of fun here. This is a very interesting and fun experience as you kind of go through it and all that. Okay, so any more questions? I just want to check and make sure we've answered all the questions. I don't see any more posted there. Zaina, anything come up on your end?
Nope, I don't see anything either.
Okay, Zand, anything you want to add?
I'm just really excited for the teams to get started.
All right. Okay, well that finishes up today. Next week, we'll be hopping into ideation. Oh, okay. Let's see, I got another question just popped up. Somebody just said it, last minute one. Would you recommend our mentor and team schedule in a group me or just by email? Personally, I think I would do email. You can use group me as kind of a reminder, but all of you should be using email and checking your email. I know that's not necessarily what every high school and college student thinks is important, but the business world today, including the startup world, works a lot by email. So I'd highly encourage you to get your email shared and use that. Use GroupMe as kind of a reminder for it, but that's much better. Any tips for writer's block? That's an interesting one. No, just, I mean, I've given you some starting ideas. So by the way, feel free to plagiarize any of my problems you want to kind of bring to your group. That's perfectly fine. So I guess that'd be my only tip for writer's block. But the good news is you got 6 people on your team. Everybody brings in a bunch of ideas, and you should have lots of good ideas to start with. Any other questions?
I do have one reminder for the group. We do have a virtual training session at noon that Zaina is going to remind you of, and you received a group me on this morning. So this gives you a little bit of time to take a break and then rejoin us at noon.
Yeah, and then I'm going to be sending this PowerPoint. First of all, this has been recorded, so you'll get access to that. And then secondly, Zaina is going to send you out a copy of this presentation, so you have it also too to use with your groups and all that. But good job week 1, lots of good participation. I'm really excited to kind of see where you guys go with this. And let's go change the world, huh?
Thank you, Mike. I'm going to close us out here. Thank you, everyone, for taking the time to join us today. Thank you, Professor Halloran again, Zand and Bethany, for being with us today and for a great presentation. Again, the recorded version and a PDF version of the slides will be shared with you guys soon. Make sure you guys join that group me again. And tune back in at 12 for our next webinar, Chaos to Concept, the Power of Design Thinking with Elisa Smith, Director of Corporate Innovation Services.
And the survey.
Make sure to fill out the survey on your way out. Have a great day, everyone.